Thought for the day. Motivation is not something you have, it's something you do.
Welcome to 7 Minutes for Yourself. I'm Christina, and I'm so glad you've joined me for what I believe will be 7 of the most enriching minutes of your day. Let's take this time to reconnect with ourselves and improve our well-being.
In today's episode of 7 Minutes for Yourself, we are exploring the power of training our brains to do hard things and actually enjoying it. Have a listen.
You probably don't have a problem playing video games or browsing social media on your phone. In fact, I have no doubt you could sit in front of a screen and do both of those activities for 2 hours or even longer without breaking your concentration. But what about half an hour of studying? Oof, that might be too hard. How about working on your side business for another hour? Doesn't sound too appealing. Even though you logically know that studying, exercising, building a business, or something equally productive will bring you more benefits in the long run, you still prefer watching TV, playing video games, and scrolling through social media. One might argue that it's obvious why. One activity is easy and doesn't require much effort, while the other activity is difficult and it requires you to apply yourself. But some people seem to have no problem studying, exercising, or working on their side projects regularly. Which begs the question, why are some people more motivated to tackle difficult things? And is there a way to make doing difficult things easy? To answer this question, we need to look at this brain neurotransmitter: dopamine. Dopamine is often considered a pleasure molecule. But that's not quite what it does. Dopamine is what makes us desire things. And it's that desire that gives us the motivation to get up and do stuff. When it's cold outside, our body temperature falls. As a result, we start shivering to generate heat and warm the body. However, when it's hot outside, our body temperature rises, and we start sweating to lose some of that heat. Essentially, our body is looking to maintain temperature of around 37 degrees Celsius or 98 degrees Fahrenheit no matter what. But there is another way homeostasis manifests itself, and that is through tolerance. For example, someone who rarely drinks alcohol will get drunk really fast, but someone who drinks on a regular basis will have to drink more alcohol because their body has developed a tolerance to it. Essentially, it takes more and more alcohol to make them drunk because they've become less sensitive to its effects. And it's not much different with dopamine. Your body tries to maintain homeostasis, so it downregulates your dopamine receptors. Essentially, your brain gets used to having high levels of dopamine, and those levels become your new normal. Thus, you develop a dopamine tolerance. This can be a huge problem because the things that don't give you as much dopamine don't interest you any longer. And it's much more difficult to motivate yourself to do them. They feel boring and less fun because they don't release as much dopamine compared to the things that do release it in high amounts. That's why people tend to prefer playing video games or browsing the internet compared to studying or working on their business. Video games make us feel good and comfortable as they release a lot of dopamine. Sadly, things like working hard or reading release it in lower amounts. Of course, avoiding high dopamine behavior once in a while is good. But ideally, you should avoid those behaviors altogether, or at least as much as possible. Instead, you want to connect more dopamine to the things that will actually benefit you. And what I found is that your current high dopamine activities can serve as an incentive to pursue things that actually give you those long-term benefits. In other words, you could use your high dopamine activity as a reward for completing difficult work. And this is exactly what I do myself. I track all the difficult, low dopamine work I do. Cleaning my apartment, practicing the piano, reading books, doing some sort of exercise, creating these videos, etc. After I'm able to get a certain amount of work done, I reward myself with some amount of high dopamine activity at the end of the day. The key words here are after and at the end of the day. If I indulge in high dopamine behavior first, then I'm not going to feel like doing the low dopamine work. I'm simply not going to be motivated enough. So I always start with the difficult things, only then I allow myself to indulge in high dopamine activities. To give you an example, for every completed hour of low dopamine work, I reward myself with 15 minutes of high dopamine behavior at the end of the day. That means that for 8 hours of low dopamine, I allow myself roughly 2 hours of high dopamine behavior. Of course, these are my ratios. You can tweak them to your liking. Also, it has to be noted that if you're addicted to something that's damaging to your health, then you don't want to treat that behavior as a reward. Instead, find a different reward that's not as damaging. One that you still think is worth the effort. And if you're wondering what my guilty pleasure is, it's the internet. I can easily get lost there for hours without doing anything else. That's why I have this system. It's so I'm able to control my addiction. But make no mistake, even with this system, I still plan days where I abstain from high dopamine activities completely.
That concludes today's episode of 7 Minutes for Yourself. Please take a moment to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. Today and every day with your kiddo is a gift. Enjoy it. Thanks for tuning in.